should have. Oops. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Allow me to welcome His Excellency, Minister Ayman Safadi of Jordan. It's a pleasure to have you here with us this morning. Just as an opening question, we've seen Jordan become increasingly involved in regional affairs, and with the Middle East becoming a locus for great power competition, how would you assess the evolving role of the United States, Russia, and China in the region?
I'm assuming I'm talking to Maha because I can't see
yes, it's Maha. It's Maha. Your side. It's Maha. كيفك معاليك?
Yeah. Well, good morning to you all, and thank you for this session. The United States has always played a leading role in the region, and most of the issues with which we need to make progress, we do need an active U.S. involvement when it comes to the core issue in the region, which is the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and our efforts to move ahead with the Middle East peace process with a view to achieving the lasting peace that we all seek on the basis of the two-state solution. We do need a U.S. engagement. We have seen this current administration announcing a number of positions that are encouraging and need to be engaged with a view to seeing how we can get all the parties back on the table. When it comes to Syria, there's been no strategy to address this conflict and really move forward towards a solution. And it is imperative that we do have US-Russian cooperation in order to move ahead with efforts to bring about that solution. So Russia is a key player, the US is a key player in Syria in particular. I do not believe that we will be able to get the progress that we all want to achieve unless we do have US-Russian cooperation. Obviously, China has a lot of economic weight in the region, not much in Jordan in terms of investment, but if we look at the regional map, we do see China as a major economic player as well. Ultimately, I think the bottom line is that the Middle East is key to global security. Definitely, it's clear it's key to European security, and ultimately, we do believe that given that most of the conflicts in the region have global consequences, a global effort is needed to address them. And in addition to Russia and the US, I would also add and emphasize the important role that Europe has been playing and can play in the region as well.
Foreign Minister Ali Hassan here, international TV presenter and journalist. Very glad to see that you could overcome the initial technical difficulties to join us here this morning. And speaking of overcoming technical difficulties, your country, of course, is very much engaged in expanding its role in regional stabilization initiatives. Could you lay out some of the initiatives, some of the priorities that your country has in the region at this moment?
Jordan has always worked towards peace. We do believe that in order for us to be able to achieve this prosperity, economic achievement that we all need, we have to create a regional environment of stability and security and cooperation. We've been at the receiving end of every crisis in the region. If you look at our economic performance, you would see the tremendously negative impact of external shocks on our ability to move forward. 10 years ago, our economy was growing at about 8 to 10%. Even before COVID, it went down to under 2. And if you factor in the impact of refugees on Jordan, closure of borders, the impact of terrorism in the whole region, all that has impacted us. So accordingly, Jordan has always employed an active diplomacy with a view to working with all our partners to bring about solutions to the conflicts that we face. Priorities are clear for us. Number one priority is the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. The regional the regional lasting peace that we all seek, the comprehensive peace that we all want, will not be achieved without ending the occupation, bringing about the two-state solution that would allow for a Palestinian state with occupied Jerusalem on June 4, 1967 lines established to live in peace and security side by side Israel. So, and now, as I say that, we cannot continue with the absence of political and both economic horizons in the Palestinian territories now. There's been no political horizon for a while. Economic conditions for the PNE and for the Palestinian people have been worsening. We do have to create both economic horizons and a political horizon, but I want to emphasize that economic horizons cannot and should not be seen as an alternative to political horizon. They should be seen and employed as an enabler of political horizon. The status quo is untenable, and the calm that we've all worked so hard to achieve would require not only not repeating steps, provocative, illegal steps that provoked the violence of April, May, but would also require proactive effort to bring about economic horizon and get the parties back to the table. UNRWA is another priority for us. The agency serves, as you know, about 5.6 million people. 560,000 kids go to UNRWA schools. 263,000 kids go to UNRWA schools in Gaza alone. The agency has been suffering from very painful financial deficit. In partnership with Sweden, we held a conference not too long ago in Brussels. We were able to have our partners reiterate political support for UNRWA and bring about some financial donations as well, but that's not enough. And what's at stake is the right of those refugees to education, to health services, and to a life of dignity. So that is another immediate priority, I would say. Obviously, Syria is is another priority for Jordan. As you know, we have 367 kilometers of border with Syria. On a bilateral level, the impact of the crisis continuing has been growing. We have 1.3 million Syrians living in Jordan. We have our trade routes to Europe disrupted. In the past, we had the threat of terrorism as a potent threat. Now we have even another as dangerous threat, which is the threat of drug smuggling, and that all these are threats to our national security. And in addition to that, on the broader level, we have not seen any strategy to really bring about the political solution that we all agree is the only path to solving the crisis. So we're also working with all our partners to see if we can get traction towards a political solution and get some immediate steps that have to do with improving the living conditions of the people, minimizing their humanitarian suffering, and providing their needs for humanitarian and other assistance as well. In all, I think our priority in Jordan is to contribute effectively to efforts to bring about regional stability and security. We also have, for instance, the trilateral mechanism between Jordan, Egypt, and Iraq with a view to building what could be a model of regional cooperation in terms of each country bringing to the table what it has and complementing on that. Supporting Iraq and supporting Iraq's stability is also a priority for us. We all know the tremendous price the whole world paid when Iraq was invaded by Daesh, and I use the word invaded carefully because it was an invasion. Daesh was not just Iraqis, it was fighters from all over. Iraq achieved a great victory, but still we need to consolidate that victory by, again, improving the living conditions of the people and supporting the efforts the current Iraqi government is taking to bring about tangible, achieve progress in livelihood of its people, and also consolidate security and move ahead with the political process that they have. Our region is full of crises, but we also believe that our region has a lot of opportunities. So what Jordan has always done is try to, again, mitigate those crises, contribute to peace and stability, and then work together to try bring about economic development and an opportunity.
Minister Safadi, Maha again, Maha Yahya. Just to pick up on where you left off when it comes to the Middle East peace process and the Palestinian prospects for Palestinian statehood. Jordan's misgivings, obviously, over President Trump's deal of the century and concerns that this could be at the expense of Jordan have given way to renewed bilateral relations between Jordan and Israel, particularly, for example, cooperation over issues related to water and electricity. My question would be, can such cooperation support the revival of a Middle East peace process, or are we really at a point, does Jordan really at a point now accept that the reality of the two-state solution is simply no more? And what would that mean then for Jordan?
The alternative to the two-state solution is the one-state reality. And I don't say one-state solution because one state will not be a solution. It will be an ugly reality, a reality of apartheid which cannot be tenable and which would only lead to deepening the crisis. So we cannot give up on the two-state solution. We do warn of illegal measures that undermine the viability of that solution. And as such, we continue to work with all our partners and our friends to make sure that we create horizon for the restoration of talks that would take us towards the two-state solution. Economic relations can never be an alternative to a political solution of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and that is something that has been a stable, constant position of Jordan. Economies help, but again, as an enabler of a political horizon and not as an alternative to a political horizon. In terms of cooperation, the previous Israeli government, previous Israeli prime minister, to be honest, did everything he could to disrupt everything in the region, not just when it comes to economic cooperation and development projects in the region, but also the horizons for peace and the peace process. With the Israeli government now that is in place, we do talk. We've had a peace treaty for 27 years, and our conversation is centered on how do we create the overall environment that would advance an environment of comprehensive peace in the region. I would remind you that when Jordan signed the peace treaty in 1994, it did so within the context of a collective search for peace following Oslo, and the promise then was a comprehensive peace that would unlock the potential of the region for more cooperation. So we continue to work on that as focus, and in the meantime, we try to see how do we address problems and how do we create opportunities that would consolidate that environment to peace.
Foreign Minister, I want to ask you about Lebanon. As a matter of fact, we have your counterpart, your Lebanese counterpart, is here with us in Rome in person here in the room. And as we all know, over the past year, the socioeconomic situation in Lebanon has drastically decreased and deteriorated. So in your opinion, what steps can the international community and in particular Arab states take to alleviate the suffering, to improve the situation, to provide support to Lebanon in order, both the short and long term, in order to help the country, in order to move it forward? Your country obviously is engaged in a gas deal with Egypt that would provide electricity, gas to Lebanon via Syria. What other initiatives could be considered? What's on the table?
Sir, the point of departure is that we've got to help Lebanon. We cannot afford another disaster in the region. We cannot afford for Lebanon to sink deeper into the crisis that is affecting all its people, and would, if it goes deeper, have terrible consequences for a region that is already plagued with more than enough of crises and trouble. We need to save Lebanon, the country and the people. This has been a priority for Jordan. His Majesty the King, when he was in the States earlier this year, was extremely focused on all of us coming together to help Lebanon, and we start with the immediate. And therefore, His Majesty set up a crisis center in Amman in coordination with our Lebanese brother to try and see how we can coordinate efforts, sending medical supplies and whatever immediate needs that are necessary for our Lebanese brethren. The issue of electricity also came up as a way to help Lebanon, and as such, this is an issue that His Majesty discussed with the American administration. We discussed it with all our partners, and now we proceeded in talks that would allow for two things. One, the provision of gas, Egyptian gas, through Jordan and Syria into Lebanon, and two, the provision of Jordanian electricity through linking with the Syrian grid and into Lebanon as well. And talks have progressed well on both fronts. Some technical issues remain to be worked out. On the issue of the grid, we're working for the grid in Syria to be fixed as maintenance is taking place. Ultimately, it's up to the Lebanese people to address the political process, and we do hope that the Lebanese would be able to proceed with the consolidation of their government institutions. Regionally, I think the challenge should be on supporting Lebanon, making sure it doesn't collapse further in the crisis that it's facing. And again, we have to accept that Lebanon, the country and the people should be given priority over whatever differences we have with the way in which politics of the country are being handled. So I would say there's a lot of responsibility on our Lebanese brethren themselves, and then without our support, still global support, they will not be able to address all the problems, but it has to start with a Lebanese-made, homegrown solution that would address their problems, and that should be consolidated and supported by a regional and a global effort.
Thank you, Minister Safadi. Turning now from Lebanon to Syria. Some months have passed since the beginning of a dialogue with Damascus. I would ask, how would you assess the results that have been achieved so far? And in a kind of a reciprocal way, would you consider that Damascus is both ready and willing to give back? In other words, what does Syria need to do to be fully reinstated into the Arab League and brought back into the Arab fold? given all the challenges that we're all aware of related to the current system in the country and everything that has passed over the past decade?
Look, I mean, again, as I said earlier, there are two dimensions to our relation with Syria and to our approach to the crisis in Iraq. The first is bilateral. And on the bilateral, we're doing what every country should be doing, which is protect our interests and mitigate against any threats that are emanating from the chaos that we've seen coming out as a result of the crisis. So when it comes to the bilateral, we've got issues of the border security, mitigating against terrorist groups that are trying to regroup in the south, making sure that we also tackle the drug trafficking operations, which are huge, by the way. Hardly a week passes by without us catching a shipment or two. And the smugglers are very, very professional, and that is a major concern for us. We've got issues of water. As you know, we're border countries again, as I said. We've got issues also of Syrians in Jordan, and I would just throw some numbers, if I may, Maha. Over 70% of refugees in Jordan come from the immediate south and the deeper south into Syria. So what happens in the south is really something of great importance to us. And we've got the issues of trade between border cities and others. So transport across borders into Lebanon and across Jordan into Jordan and across Jordan into the Gulf as well. So these are issues that we're discussing with a view to making sure that we minimize the impact of the crisis in Syria on Jordan, and also help from a humanitarian perspective as much as we can. And when we speak of refugees, I have to, if you allow me, to warn against the decline in attention given to refugees and support provided to them as well. There's a tremendous dangerous negative trend here with less and less support coming to refugees. And I keep saying to all our friends is that if we provide those refugees with education, with job prospects, with a dignified lives, then they would be the army that would rebuild their country, and they would be positive members in the communities in which they stay as refugees. But if we abandon them to need and deprivation and bitterness and ignorance, then this is the environment on which all radical thinking preys. So we've got to be careful with that, and refugees cannot be the responsibility of host countries alone. People speak of donor fatigue. I have to also put against that host country fatigue as well. So I do hope that international support for refugees will pick up, because we cannot victimize those people twice. They've been victimized by the crisis. We cannot victimize them by not meeting their needs. On the broader issue of solving the crisis, this is a crisis that has gone for far too long. Our priority in Jordan is to move towards a political solution that would preserve the territorial integrity of Syria, that would result in the departure of all foreign forces of Syria, that would rid Syria of the terrorist groups, and that will create conditions conducive for the return of refugees. And that means addressing all the humanitarian and living conditions in Syria as well. In that, there's got to be an Arab role. It's incomprehensible that everybody gets a seat on the table except the Arab world collectively. So what we're trying to do in Jordan is, again, create political horizon consistent with the global agreement that the only solution is political, and work with our brethren in the region to try and see how we can all come together and have a collective Arab role in efforts to bring about the crisis. There are things that must be addressed. Resolution 2585 not only speaks of a cross-border humanitarian support, but it also speaks of early recovery. And the way we see it in Jordan is that if you have 1,000 kids, whether they're growing under the government or under the opposition, they need a school to go to, they need a clinic to be treated, they need food on the table. And ultimately, I would just point to one other fact. 3 million kids of school-going age in Syria are not going to school. That is a threat for the future. And this is the comprehensive long-term way or prism through which we look at the crisis in Syria. And that's why we're going to continue to try to do everything we possibly can to create a political horizon and make sure that the crisis is back about Syria and the Syrian people, and minimize the fact that it has become a battleground for regional and global agendas.
Can I just do a quick follow-up with you, Your Excellency, on this, is in terms of what does Syria need to do? We know what you're all trying to do in terms of, and you're absolutely right on all the issues you've raised, but what does Syria need to do also as part of its end of the deal?
Look, 2254 provides a benchmark that is a globally agreed one. And I believe that if we move along the steps there, that will be a good path. The Constitutional Committee, we hope, will be able to achieve some progress. It has been meeting, and the UN envoy is working on that. So progress on the Constitutional Committee is important. Maintaining environment that would allow for humanitarian support to get into Syria is also important. We do emphasize the importance of renewing 2585 because it does provide a mechanism that allows for both early recovery and humanitarian access. So we need to work really in a step-by-step kind of approach to make sure that we get a process moving. It's not going to be done overnight, but if we agree that 2254 is the ultimate goal, then we need to start with steps that would take us along that path.
Foreign Minister, we're almost out of time. We are nearing the end of the session, but I do want to ask you about the one issue, of course, that's been dominating the global headline for 2 years now, namely the pandemic. We are in the midst of a pandemic, very evident by the fact that you are joining us not here on stage in Rome, but virtually. Every country, of course, has its economic challenges throughout this time. Your country certainly is no exception. What challenges lie ahead for your country in the recovery process, economic recovery process, from the consequences, economic consequences of this pandemic?
Like on every other country, the pandemic has had a tremendously strong toll on us. At the beginning of the pandemic, we had to have a full closure, which obviously slowed down the economic growth, affected all sectors of the economy, and then we opened up, but still we're recovering. So right now we're all facing the unknown sort of consequences of the new mutation of the virus. In Jordan, we've had it good for a few months, but in the past couple of months we're seeing the sort of curve going up a little bit. We're about 8 to 10% positivity rate now. So we're having to take measures, but we cannot afford to close the economy anymore because ours is a small economy and a lot of our private sector businesses have been affected. So again, there's got to be a global solution to this. Everything has been disrupted. The supply chain has been disrupted. You said I couldn't be there, not just because of the COVID, but also getting flights was not an easy thing as well. So also remember, we have 1.3 million refugees as well from Syria alone. What we've done is that everybody who's in Jordan gets the same treatment. So when it comes to vaccination and other care, everybody gets the same treatment. We've done very well relatively, I think, with the vaccination program. About 60% of the targeted segment of society, which means those over the age of 18, have been vaccinated, 2 shots. But the economy has been challenged, tourism, services, small businesses, and that is something that we're grappling with. So we did have an economic plan that is geared more towards attracting foreign investment, improving our legislative environment with a view to making it more competitive. But again, it has had a big toll. Gladly, the ability of our health sector to meet the challenge has been excellent. We continue to do that. So while we focus on making sure that we protect our people from COVID and we provide the treatment that's necessary, we're also focused on finding economic horizons and see what steps can be taken to bring about economic activity within the country and across borders as well.
Well, all's well that ends well. It took a while to get you online, but this turned out to be a very wide-ranging, content-rich discussion. The Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Jordan, Ayman, Safadi from Yahya and myself here in Rome. Thank you so much for joining us, and hope to see you in person before too long. All the best.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Okay. All is well.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated as we start next session right after this.